Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my wanted to talk to you about what is going on economically, not only here in the United States but worldwide. But basically, because I'm based here in the United States, I'm pretty much going to give you information on what's taking place economically here in the United States. And what has been going on for the last 2 years, since 2020, it's been what I would call a PSYOP, a psychological operation. Um, the military in the United States has done this many times after, well, actually, even during World War II, but really have stepped it up, especially in the last, what we call the Middle East perspective, what's taking place there with the United States being involved in Libya, involved in Iraq, and also the second Iraq, also twice. And they've used psychological warfare to basically destroy the enemy before they even fight them. In other words, to defeat them before they even have to battle, to have to even fight them per se. So there's a loss of very little casualties that take place. Anyway, so this is the main event, folks. What has happened the last 2 years is not the main event. It's a way of basically trying to destroy mankind on this planet. That's the whole plan, you see. If any of you ever gone to the Georgia Guidestones, they make it very clear what they're doing and going to do. And this plan's been going on for some time, probably over 200 years, if not longer. In fact, more than 200 years. We would say basically May 1st, 1776. So that's over 200 years. So that will give you that background. Now, the whole idea that people, when you say the Fed, they think that basically that is talking about the federal government, but in reality, that's not the federal government. It's a group of probably six bankers. These are what we call private bankers, and this is I've done videos on this with Woodrow Wilson was involved with this, and I don't want to go into that. You can go to my channel www discerning what is true. That is my YouTube channel, and you can watch the videos. I've done probably 100 videos or near that in the last 2 years. I haven't done any here recently. Just haven't had the time. I've been doing other things. So what I'm seeing, and I'm going to share a screen here for you. Let me go here and show you a screen. Let's see. It's not working the way I wanted to work. So there's some key channels you can look at. I'll show you this also later, but I wanted to tell you the name of them. There's a group of people, what they call the Kitco News, and this will give you an idea of what's really going on. And you need to be aware of it because they talk about all the economic influences that take place worldwide. They talk about gold prices, they talk about silver prices, they talk about minerals, they talk about all types of aspects that are going on throughout the world. There's another particular channel I watch. It's called the Atlantics, Atlantis report. And they've been direly warning here, and they have major, what I would call economic people talking, such as Jim Rogers, David Morgan, also Dr. Mark Faber, and they talk about issues such as Bitcoin also. So you may want to look at that particular channel. It's called the Atlantics Report. That is all on YouTube. And one of the guys who deals with what we call the the Fed is a guy named, his channel is called Best Evidence, BEST Evidence also. And what he does is simply is he diagrams what the Fed is up to. In other words, he when they speak, especially the guys that are speaking about this, he looks in them and listening to what they say. And so they have to again give you somewhat clues in what they're doing. And I've been following this guy for the last, well, probably a couple of years. He's really good. So I would advise you to look in these guys, these channels I'm sharing from. So my point here is this. If you think everything is fine and dandy and that you can work at home, you're being fooled. This is a whole complicated deal as far as I can see the way. And they part of it's already been tested, especially in Australia, I think in the Melbourne area, has been tested to see how people react. This has already been done in testing also at universities. Okay. It's been done probably at Stanford. It wouldn't surprise me. Some East Coast also who takes money, gets money from the government, does these studies. How people would what we call respond in certain ways if certain things happen. One would be the study I'm thinking of. I'm thinking it's out west. Stanford was the one with the professor who kept electrocuting particular people behind a wall. And a student was told that there was no harm being done, but yet he could hear the pain, excruciating pain from the tested person. They were trying to figure out that people had the ability to have a moral viewpoint and saying, wait a minute, this is wrong what I'm doing. But they found out simply is that pretty much all the students obeyed. They're willing to obey the authorities, you see. So they've done that. And so this whole deal with Australia, with Melbourne, I don't know anywhere else, but there are probably other places that have been tested to see how this would work out. So what's transpiring here is simply going to be massive inflation. And so what is massive inflation? Well, massive inflation, only what I've seen in my lifetime was that during the 80s, and I had a job, so it didn't affect me that much, but things did go up, prices did, but I still had a job. Now, that's different now. The country is in far worse shape than it was in the 1980s. Let's go back in history. Let's go back, and I'm not going to go into Woodrow Wilson. I've done a whole study on that. But I want to talk to you about Richard Nixon, the president in the 1970s. In 1971, what was transpiring was simply is that the United States dollar was in trouble. And what was happening was it was two countries, mainly France and I think Japan, but France was a major player. They began to see an issue with the dollar. And instead of taking dollars, they chose to take the gold. And what was happening simply was there was a crisis taking place to the point that the reserves that were such and such with gold were being depleted here in the United States to give to these other countries. And so what transpired simply is that it was a talking deal. Simply, you can't allow this to happen. And so there was what we call the petrodollar. This would try to stabilize the dollar by using it as oil and having it pegged to the dollar and buying oil from Saudi Arabia. And so what took place was simply that stemmed the tide of simply them taking all the gold. And the promise in the whole deal with the Saudi Arabians was this: we'll allow you to base your dollar, but you have to protect our country if anything happens. In other words, if there's military aggression that takes place to our country, you will defend our country. You will protect the oil fields. And so that's what transpired. That transpired until last year. All changed then. The whole book, everything's changed now in the Middle East. The balance of power is completely changed because Saudi Arabia and Iran are the major players, and the United States has lost both those players. So last year, the Saudi Arabians broke the treaty with the United States and said, we want Russia to now defend us. So that was penciled in, or I should say sign in. And that means simply is the dollar is no longer tied to the oil. And so this has been a big advantage for the United States, big advantage for us, because simply is that the United States could continue to spend money as they continue to spend money, as they've been doing, trillions and trillions of dollars. And what's transpiring now is that the government, the Fed, has been printing money to get through all these crises that we had. The crisis that just took place 2 years ago, the crisis that took place in 2008, the crisis before that. There have been many crises that the stock market was going to possibly collapse, and they've come in and rescue it. The last one is 2008. What's now taking place is a scenario that they're not going to be able to back out of. They're just printing paper money now. And the United States is paying their debts by this paper money. And eventually, that's not going to work because these other countries are not going to take it, you see, because the dollar is not going to be there. You see, almost not quite 50% of the countries now in the world are, what would say, have no faith in the dollar. And it's going to move towards the euro, and that won't last long because their base is a fiat currency. And a fiat currency simply means there's no gold or silver behind it. There's no protection. So all I have is your belief that it's good money. It's not backed by gold. It's not by silver, backed by silver. This is all educational, but you have to understand when they say inflation, what they're doing is they're devaluing the dollar. That's what the real deal. That's why the dollar inflates. That's why it's not worth anything. You know, we know that there are other countries out there, such as Argentina, could experience inflation, massive inflation, but nowhere near as bad as Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe created what we call $1 million bills, and they're totally worthless because there's nothing behind them. No one would buy them. In fact, what was taking place in Zimbabwe, they were using, this is the former country of Rhodesia. This is a country north, what we call northeast of South Africa. When I was going to college in the 1980s, South Africa was a political and military and economic power of all of Africa. No more. That's all changed. It's probably Nigeria now. So South Africa is no longer what we call the power base. But anyway, what was happening simply is that there was a completely trade between Zimbabwe and South Africa. And Zimbabwe is what we would call the breadbasket of South Africa, Southern Africa. So that provided not only bread and milk and crops, food for the South Africans. It dealt with the Botswana, Namibia on the western side, also Mozambique, and probably Uganda, and probably even to Congo, so to speak. So what's happening now is that the United States dollar is becoming worthless. And we're going to become a third world country here. And so I'm recommending that you be aware that what you're seeing now is this is the tip of the iceberg. Okay. This is the tip of the iceberg is what's taking place. It's far worse than what you ever think of. This will be far worse than the Great Depression. And that's why I recommend people buying food and having water and being out of debt and having some type of important assets in order to deal with hard times that you have to have something, especially if you have to have some type of medical procedure be done to you that they would not take dollars, but they would take precious metal. Or you need something that's very expensive and they will take gold or silver. That's what I mean by precious metals. So I venture today. I've been seeing it. And part of this also is the escalation of what we call a so-called war that's taking place in Ukraine. I don't know what's taking place. I don't even know who's telling the truth here. Has there really been an invasion in Ukraine or not by Russia? I do know something else that's kind of a red flag to me. That red flag, if the United States has responded in some way, and again, I don't know, but I've heard rumors, is that our Navy is involved and we have troops, we're having troops move from certain parts of the world towards that area. Now, what's happening is good cop, bad cop is taking place. The United States is seen now as the good cop, and the bad cop is Russia since they invaded Ukraine. So all this whole shame deal or blaming Russia, such and such, or Putin or whatever, is what's taking place in the West. And I don't want any wars. I'm tired of wars. It destroys not only our country, but destroys other countries that are involved. It's a win-win for those who sit on the sidelines and invest in who's going to win or not win. Both sides give each side money. That's why all these world wars we've had here in the last 100 years or over have been to do with that. There's well-to-do people who are speculating on who will win the war and simply give these countries or whatever plenty of money, which all that does is drain the countries. Eventually, they have to pay back those loans one way or the other. And that's how they buy things up and steal things, you see, for pennies on a dollar, so to speak. So my point here simply is this. This is a procedure with simply is that you're working from home. You can do all your work now at home, so to speak. This is grand. You don't have to be around people, such and such. And they have eliminated what I would call the small guys now. There's no small companies now. They're only the big boys, such and such. So all the little companies, small little hardware stores, all gone. That's taking place. Gone. This is gone the last 2 years. Family restaurants, what we had little small garages and such, that's gone. It's all for the corporations. It's all for the big boys. And those of you participating in it, you're part of the problem. You see, you allowed it because you believed in fear. And fear is a big story in how they cause the destruction, not only with individuals or their psyche, but also to do with what I would call countries and companies. People lose their lives, lose their fortunes, whatever they had is gone, you see. So the idea simply is they're going to basically clamp down here. And my thinking is simply is they're going to produce what I would call some type of foreign troops here, and they're going to enforce that. And I think that each country is sending troops to certain other areas to enforce that across the world. China is a different sport. China is a different story. China is going to police itself, to be honest with you, with their social credits. And that might be the plan too. That's a possibility. That's what they're moving. In fact, that might be a bigger plan than simply moving armies and such. There'll be social credits. And so you'll be giving such and such, let's say $500 worth of food or per month or whatever. I don't know. $500 seems like a lot now, but what would it be when the inflation is continuing over and over again? And then if you speak out or say something, you lose your points. This is a China model. I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but that's what I sense they're going to do. Or they either use the military, but that point simply would be moved in some way. Simply as that would be awfully expensive. They've got people where they want them. People believe in authority. That was the test. They've done many tests, and Australia was one of those, to see if people would stay in their homes even though they're starving or whatever. The only reason why they're allowed to get out sometimes were to go to the grocery store, so to speak. So these are all tests. These are tests to see if mankind is going to go along with it or not. And Australia is, as far as I know, has been somewhat successful in what they've done. And so this is what's transpiring. So what this happening simply is, this is key, is simply is you need to be able to grow your own food. You need to be able to be independent and not dependent upon anybody. You see, that's the whole plan here. If you don't do this, no one's going to be able to help you unless you're able to trade with them back and forth, which is what you want to do. But if you're not going to participate in that, you're going to be on the outside, and people are not going to be able to have extra food, such and such, because they're going to be basically trying to survive. You see, and part of this internal passport deal, when I spoke about Ukraine, is to prevent people from going to family members or friends. You see, you won't be allowed to travel. Oh yeah, because simply as well, we don't need cars anymore because you're working at home. You see, all these things are coming into place. You can see how this puzzle is being is constructed together, and is being put together to the point simply is that you, if you're not independent and not, if you're being self-sufficient and independent, you're going to be you're going to be in a bad shape. The other thing simply is you need to be out of the cities. The cities are the worst place to be, because people will become desperate and they will do anything for food. That's a fact, folks. They will do anything. And I know that simply is because the Ukrainians, when they were being starved to death, eventually got to the point simply they would kill their children and eat their flesh. That was how bad it got. And this wasn't because they were working. They were starving to death simply because they could. They were actually, many of them were eating dirt, trying to survive, you see, because there are minerals and somewhat in dirt. But it got so bad eventually. And like I said, there were over near 11 million people who starved in the area of Ukraine. And that's a hush hush. None of it's talked about in history. It's all been put, they don't want you to know these things. They want you to, oh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? They want you to, they don't want that to be, they don't want it to be talked about, you see, because they don't want you to be aware of this has already been tested. This was tested in Ukraine in the 1930s, you see, and it worked. Another particular book is a gentleman's book is called Death by Government. And this is a professor who was at Hawaii, and he proved what he called genocide and mass murder since 1900. There's a proof that he was a Hawaiian professor. His name is R.J. Rummel. I guess you had to pronounce it Rummel. And he wrote a book, Death by Government, Genocide and Mass Murder since 1900. And that's documentary, you see. And it's somewhat conservative figures. It's not, elaborate. And this goes all the way till, I think he did this study in, I'm thinking probably late 90s or early 2000s. I think he's passed away. He's no longer living. But you can do a search at Amazon, and you can, or either read it online. Death by Government, in fact, is actually here. Just look it up on the internet. I'm looking at it right now. It was done in 1994 is the publication date. And this is done by the own governments. This is not even war. It has nothing to do with war. This is about what you call the Khmer Rouge. This was about the Nazi genocide state. This was about the Soviet Gulag state system. All this is talking about this. Also to deal with the situation that took place in North Korea. All these deaths. And he came up to the point simply is over 128 million people of what we call the major deals, but that wasn't all of them. It came up to a total of almost 169.2 million people were killed by their own government. By their own government. Not some foreign intruder, not some foreign enemy. Okay? So I'm not going to make this video much longer. I've done videos on this before. Warning people, and many people are just acting like, oh, well, Jesus is coming. Really? Jesus is coming. I don't think so, folks. We've been given so many reprieves, but this is, I think, the real deal, you see. So I hope that you would watch this. I would hope that you go to, again, like I said, you go to Kitco, look at these guys, what's happening. They talk about Bitcoin. I'm not a fan of Bitcoin. I believe there's I don't believe in it, but you can watch it. It's, again, this guy does a speaker here with Kitco. He interviews almost all credible people in the economics. Most of these gentlemen who give this reports are much older. They're in their 70s, many of these men, maybe even older than that, trying to give you advice, help you, because they've been around long enough to know what's going on, you see. And the other guy simply he investigates the Federal Reserve System, which is not federal, and it has nothing to do with any bankers here in America, except a couple of them. There's a group of 6 bankers that did this, or maybe it was 8, that this took place under the Woodrow Wilson administration to allow them as private bankers to now not only print money, but to charge interest to the government, and they create booms and busts. This is a win-win thing with what's taking place even in Ukraine, you see. So your gas prices have shot up immensely in the last 4 days. It's all based on speculation also. It's not what's in the pipeline, it's they just changed the prices immediately. And there's the other site I watch is the Atlantis report. It has 166,000 watchers. There's Kitco, over 400,000. And best evidence is Romsley, 36,000 watchers of his channel. So I won't keep you much longer. Again, I'm just trying to give you information. This is your responsibility. I'm only someone who is trying to warn you. I'm the one in the watchtower saying, this is getting serious, folks. When I saw a chair, I posted on Facebook today, a chair that I bought 2 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, cost me around $29. That chair is now $52. And I got a bunch of them out there. And I looked around, and I don't see people visibly upset. I see people who are simply just charging it. They're just charging it. They're putting on a credit card. I bought 1 can of paint today for staining my deck. It's made by a company called Olympia, which is owned by PP&G, which is Pittsburgh Paint and Glass. There's hardly any more. We need to talk about that too sometime. We need to understand simply there's no longer any competition either, folks. There's nobody out there. The stock market, the government's allowed this to happen too. They were bought and paid for, these people. These politicians were bought. So I paid $52, approximately that, and that didn't include the tax on the paint. I live in a county. I'm sorry, I don't live in a city, but if you go and shop at these places, they're in the city limits. And so the tax, this is another thing you need to tell these rotten politicians about. They're charging you 9% sales tax here where I live at. 9%. You see, when you go like a place like Chick-fil-A or go out and eat, you're actually you're you need to eat at home. Okay. I'm not saying you don't have to eat at home all the time, but you need to understand that you're paying 9% sales tax. Do you realize this? Okay, you say, well, that's not a whole lot, but it is a lot eventually. When I came here to South Carolina, it was 4 cents. That was in the 70s. So it's 4 cent tax. Now there's no tax on buying groceries in South Carolina, which is an advantage. So you can buy groceries and not have to pay tax. But 4 cent compared to 9 cents, a big difference, folks. Because if I buy item for $100, the tax on it is not $100. The tax on it's $9, so it's $109. I'm paying a tax $9 on that product. In the past, it would have been $4. So you need to be aware, and you need to start eating at home. You need to plant your gardens. You need to have fruit trees. You need to be self-sufficient. Period. And with that, I'm going to conclude. And I appreciate you listening. And if you have questions, I'm more than glad to help you ask any of your answers. Most of you don't even ask questions, which I know simply is most people don't even get this information because I'm pretty much kept in the dark because Facebook and YouTube won't allow me to be here. You see, they don't want the truth out because they're fucking scared is what they are. You see. All right. Wish you well. Take care.